Most of you, I'm sure, are quite familiar with the famous Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage that was captured in October of 1967 at Bluff Creek in Northern California and purports to depict a real-life Sasquatch. The footage was captured by Roger Patterson, a rodeo cowboy and Bigfoot enthusiast, who was accompanied by another rodeo cowboy named Bob Gimlin. In late October of 1967, so the story goes, Patterson and Gimlin were looking to film fresh Bigfoot tracks that they had heard were present in the Bluff Creek area. What they discovered were not only the tracks, but the track maker, a large female Bigfoot who is today known as Patty. Since its publication in 1967, the Patterson-Gimlin film has been subjected to intense scrutiny by professionals from various different scientific backgrounds. People are still divided on the authenticity of the footage. Many people are under the impression that it's been thoroughly debunked. It's a man in a monkey suit, while others are absolutely convinced that the footage is real. Recently, a high-resolution AI enhancement of the Patterson-Gimlin film has become available online and is remarkable. In my opinion, it may very well depict a living, breathing creature with a heavy gait and rippling quadricep and tricep muscles. Large, rippling muscles would be very difficult to fake in a monkey suit. I've always suspected that there was more to the Patterson-Gimlin story and perhaps to the footage than we've been told. Well, according to my friend Dave Altman, there very well may be. Dave Altman has worked and lived in Hollywood for over 20 years in music, film, and TV, and currently does production and development work for different networks and production companies on the topics of UFOs, the paranormal, and more. He has been involved with projects for Steven Spielberg, J.J. Abrams, and many others. He also appeared in the film A Tear in the Sky. Dave called me some time ago and told me about some information that he was tracking in regard to the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage, and we thought it might be an interesting conversation to do publicly, so I recorded the following conversation with my friend Dave Altman. I hope you enjoy it. So Dave, you and I have been interfacing about a variety of topics for a while now, mostly stuff pertaining to UFOs, but recently we've been talking about Bigfoot. You know that I'm interested in the topic, and I've got some Bigfoot investigations in the works that I've been trying to put together. And the other day you called me and you wanted to talk to me about an investigation you were conducting regarding some new information about the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot footage. Why don't you tell us kind of what you told me and where you are in this process of this investigation?
Sure. So first off, let me start by saying that I don't know if Bigfoot's real. I don't even know if aliens are real. I'm skeptical. I hope they're real. I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence. I'm also on the fence if they are real, whether they are a relic hominid or are they supernatural or paranormal, because that has a lot to do with part of the story I'm about to tell. And actually, as I'm finding out, this isn't a new story. This has been a story that's kind of been playing out behind the scenes that not many people know about. So this story has to do with the original copy of the Patterson-Gimlin film, the copy that was in the camera that the film was actually filmed, that the original film was filmed on, that came out of the camera. That's been lost allegedly for 50 years. And I'm going to go ahead and say that word again, and that so that this entitles the entire story I'm telling is alleged. This whole thing's alleged. So about 2 years ago, one more thing is I'm going to try and not mention any names because I don't want people bothering people about this or anything. I'm going to mention one name because I talked to her. I had to get her permission to even tell this story, and she gave me permission to say her name, and I'll do it because without it, it's going to make me look stupid, like I made the whole thing up. Okay, so I was listening to a podcast a couple of years ago, and there was a guy telling a story about how he found out that there was a film was found in somebody's attic, and it was the original film. And here's how it happened. Okay, so a lot of people in the UFO field have heard of Bruce Maccabee. Bruce Maccabee was unfortunately he just passed away. He was a video analyst and video and picture analyst and all that stuff for the CIA. He was a member of the group called the Aviary that was made up by Jamie Chandray and Bill Moore, all that back in the 80s. If you don't know who he is, you can look him up. He was in almost every documentary from the 80s and 90s on UFOs. So Bruce was good friends with a man who was close with Patterson. Okay? Stay with me. This man who was friends with Patterson did some work for Patterson, and Patterson owed this guy money and didn't have the money to pay this guy. And this was in 1960 something. The Patterson film was in 67. So this was around 67, 68-ish. These guys were heavy drinkers. They were, they worked in the woods, all that stuff. These were rough guys. They did a lot of drinking. They were playing cards, and he lost to the guy. And one thing led to another. Patterson allegedly gave this guy, he won the film, the Patterson film, which was in the camera. Okay.
Now, had Patterson already published this film at this point?
I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure. I asked that question, and I'll get to that because it has a lot to do with this whole thing.
Okay.
So, years later, this guy who had the original film became good friends with Bruce Maccabee, and Bruce ended up marrying a woman named Jan Maccabee. And Jan was a Bigfoot lover. She loved Bigfoot. And before the wedding, the man who got the Patterson film found out he was diagnosed that he was dying with cancer. And he owed Bruce money. And this seems to be a common theme throughout this whole story. This film is following the money, right? Yeah.
I think it's important to remind people that Roger Patterson was an old rodeo cowboy. So these are rough guys. These are the type of guys that would be engaged in, let's say, these kind of activities and these kind of settings.
Right. So he decided to give a gift to Bruce for the wedding. So he handed Bruce a tin can with a note on it and said, "Here you go, my friend. This is for your wedding." Bruce thought nothing of it. And that was it. Forgotten about. Until about, I don't know how many years later, till about 2012, something like that. And sometime later, Jan is cleaning out the attic, and she finds the can, and she goes downstairs, and she's like, "Honey, what's this?" "I don't know. Let's put it on." And it was a 16 millimeter. And people say to me, "Oh, he just happens to have a 16 millimeter, projector." Well, yeah, it's Bruce Maccabee. It's what he does for a living. He's an optical physicist. Of course he does.
Exactly the kind of guy that would have a 16 millimeter projector, right?
So they put it on, and it's the original copy. And because it's the original copy, It's the clearest possible copy ever. So they watch it, and it gets to almost the end, and Jan says, "Oh my God, I see another Bigfoot. It looks like a juvenile." And Bruce, and you'd think Bruce would be the one to spot it, but no, Jan spots it. So I hear the guy, and now I'm hearing this through somebody else on this interview, this whole thing. The part about where the film came from, I learned later, but the part about Jan seeing it, I heard secondhand. So after I heard that during the interview, I messaged Bruce, and I have the screenshot, and I'll read it to you real quick. And I said, "Hi, Bruce. I was wondering if I could ask you a question about a film." He says, "Well, you can always ask." I said, "I was wondering about the Patty film, that you have a copy that shows a small one." And his reply was, and this was October 20th, 2022 at 12:40 a.m. "I'm keeping quiet on the Patty film evidence until we have everything analyzed." So he wasn't saying, like, "What are you talking about?" He wasn't saying no. He was saying, I'm keeping quiet on it for now. So I was like, all right, I'll get back to you. Well, what happened? Bruce passed away. So that was it for me. I didn't want to hit up Jan, who was just widowed. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, well,
the last thing she's thinking about is Bigfoot.
Right. How long do you wait? So the person who I had heard this from on this interview had mentioned that he was going to be releasing this footage in a documentary about Bruce Maccabee. And that's when they were releasing this footage. And it never happened, and Bruce passed away. So I'm like, oh my God, maybe I can do something with this. Oh, nice cut, by the way. I see your Bigfoot on there. Nice.
That's right.
So I waited a few months, and I messaged. I said, I'm just taking a chance. I'm going to message Jan. So I messaged Jan, and finally I get her to talk to me. She's like, okay, here's my number. She says, call me this weekend at this time. So I got my friend Chrissy Newton to do a conference with me, because I figured it's probably best to have another woman on the line. Might make Jan feel more comfortable to have a woman, because I knew for a fact there was probably so many of these guys bombarding her about Bruce's stuff. It'd be good to have a girl talk, you know? So she answers and she goes, oh, hi. I totally forgot we had this call set up. Call back next week. And I'm like, oh. So I finally get her on the phone, and we talked for like 2.5 hours. What happened was she hired somebody to come and digitize the film and restore it. The guy came all the way out there and digitized 2 copies, took one, gave her an encrypted copy, and never gave her the password. He took it, and he said, I'm going to release it myself on YouTube under my name. Sorry. He did that to a woman who was just widowed. So she is, she's not very happy.
If you enjoy my analysis on these topics and would like to hear more from me, I invite you to join the Alberino Analysis Members Community, where you will gain access to my weekly private briefings, live stream Q&A sessions, behind-the-scenes updates on my current projects and expeditions, community features that facilitate interaction with myself and other members, early access to tickets for events I happen to be conducting, and a convenient mobile app to keep you notified and up to date on everything I publish. In addition to all this, annual subscribers will be treated to an advanced screening of 3 episodes in a TV series I've been working on for several years. These films alone are worth the price of admission. The Alberino Analysis Members Community is the best way to connect with me and support my work. If you would like to become a member, You can find a link to the subscription page in the description of this video, or visit thealberinoanalysis.com. I hope to see you in our community. Okay, so let's summarize. Let's summarize this story.
Well, and it's more.
But basically, what we're talking about is somebody who is in possession of the original Patterson-Gimlin film, allegedly, and that this film, there's more to the film than what we've seen. Mm-hmm. And then the original, you can see what appears to be a juvenile Bigfoot. And I think you told me that it was the Patty, the female Bigfoot that is allegedly depicted in the film, bends over and picks up the baby, the juvenile, correct?
That's what I hear. Yes.
And so that's what this footage depicts.
Or the baby walks up and grabs onto her hip. Right.
And is this an extension of, because the Patterson-Gimlin film ends, the ones I've seen,
so
Patty, the female Bigfoot, walks around. She walks out of view behind some vegetation, and the film ends. So there must be more to the film and a different.
I'm getting two conflicting stories. Okay. I'm getting one from one side saying that there is extra seconds, and I'm getting another story where you need the very clean version of it to see it exactly, because I said, well, if the guy who had the original copy had the footage with the juvenile on it, how could Patterson have released any copies after that and not have anybody seen it? So I was told that the guy who had the original copy that got it from the poker game didn't want the public to see the juvenile because it would have freaked everybody out. And he didn't want anything to happen to the juvenile, which is also conflicting too because of what we're about to talk about next.
Yeah.
So I'm trying, it's like, I don't know what's going on.
But the basic data here is allegedly there's some kind of footage that exists out there that depicts a juvenile Bigfoot. That's the first part of this story.
Right.
In the same Patterson-Gimlin film.
Yeah. So either A, there's footage that is 12 seconds longer that shows a juvenile, and possibly two adults in that footage, I'm also hearing now, that are in the background when Patty's walking. Or B, it's in the footage everybody's seen, but it's so foggy.
You can't see it because because you can only see it in the original because the original is going to be better resolution than the copies.
So I think it's possible that if somebody really cleans it up with AI, and it is in the original footage, it's possible it might come out.
Yeah. But there have been, and I showed one at the beginning of this video, there are extremely high resolution AI enhancements now available for that footage. And I think, honestly, I'm persuaded, of course I could be completely wrong, but I'm persuaded that the Patterson-Gimlin film is real, that is an authentic Sasquatch. And what persuades me the most are these new AI enhancements. Because if you look at some of these new videos that are coming out, and there's all kinds of new software that is able to drastically increase low-res images, the resolution on lower-res images. And you can see, at least I can see in some of these videos, I can see quadriceps flexing in the leg.
Do they do it all the way through, or is it just her?
It's just her. Yeah. Well, they do what's the whole Patterson-Gimlin film footage,
right?
And it's enhanced with AI, with new tools that are available with AI. It doesn't add anything to the footage other than the AI goes in and enhances the pixels and probably fills in some gaps and things like that, but it's I think it's very accurate, and you can see the flexing of certain muscles, and that's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to fake in a monkey suit. And so, whereas maybe I was on the fence with the Patterson-Gimlin film before, with these new enhancements, I think they're quite compelling. But I looked, after you told me this, I went back and watched some of these enhancements, and I don't see anything else. I don't see a juvenile. I don't see other Bigfoots in the woods.
Juvenile, if you are going to look for it, it's at the very, very end of the film when you can see Patty the last time. It's way at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All I see is
me too, man. Me
creature
too.
or man in a monkey suit. That's all I see in that footage.
Yeah.
So are we going to talk about the
we can do that. Yes, yeah. So while looking into this, I got permission to mention this name as well. I met a man named M.K. Davis. And M.K. Davis turned me on to some other alleged footage, which was shot allegedly there was 3 days of filming of the Patterson footage, and on the second day it was a hunt where they went and actually hunted, shot and killed and skinned these Bigfoot, Sasquatch, big feets. And on this footage, which you can show if you want to, that footage, if you want to put it up later or whatever, these guys walking, showing the footprints, showing a tracking dog. There's allegedly puddles that show blood. There's some footage which could show, I don't know. It could be anything on the ground, but they're telling me that it shows in the clear footage that Jan saw. She told me that he brought the clear footage to her house, showed it on a projector, and she saw on the screen the bloody skins that they took on the ground. Through MK, I got a woman's name. I tracked her down. She called me. She told me she knew Patterson when she was 13 years old. She knew the guy who won the film in the poker game. She was in her 70s. She told me they filmed the entire thing, the entire massacre. There was 2 copies of the film in the world and that she owned one. And she told me that she has the footage of the dog killing the juvenile. She had it on film.
Right. And you told me, when you told me this over the phone, you said that she found it to be...
She said it was like a
shocking,
snuff film.
Disturbing. It was like a snuff film. You could hear the screaming of the Bigfoots, the adults and the juvenile. The dogs were attacking the juvenile, ripping it up, and you could hear the gunfire, and basically she equated it to watching a snuff film of human beings being murdered.
She said she would never let it see the light of day.
Light of day. Yeah.
And I didn't even ask. Now here's the crazy thing. I don't know if it's crazy, if it's coincidental. I said to her, I have a producing partner for TV. And I said, can we do a conference call with my production partner on Monday? This was on a Friday. She said, sure. We'll talk 4:00 Monday. It's been a week. Her phone has been going to voicemail. She has not read one of my Facebook messages. We've called her for multiple phone numbers. It's going to voicemail, dude.
Well, maybe she's...
I don't know.
She said she didn't want it to see the light of day, so maybe she's backing off.
But I never asked to see the film. I just wanted to talk to her.
Well,
it's just weird.
So the story goes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the story goes something like this. Most people know, I think, that Roger Patterson was a Bigfoot enthusiast, and he was making a documentary, and he really wanted... This is the backstory.
That is correct.
Okay, so he wanted to make
that's the cover story.
Okay, well, whatever. Let's remind people of what the current narrative is. He wants to make a documentary, and he really wants to get Bigfoot prints on camera. He wasn't going to try and film a Bigfoot. He didn't think that he was going to be able to get a Bigfoot on film. I think that the story goes, and this is what Bob Gimlin says to this day, they wanted to get these Bigfoot prints on camera because they were told that there were extant Bigfoot prints out there near Bluff Creek in that general vicinity, that there was a Bigfoot or a Bigfoot family walking around out there, and there were fresh prints. And so these guys, they acquisitioned a camera, they packed up their horses, and they went in. I believe they were out there for a couple weeks, or at least a week out there.
Well, we
with their
know that
animals.
they allegedly filmed for 3 days from what I'm learning, about.
Yeah, they filmed for a few days.
Because whether they were killing them or not, that footage to me lines up of the tracking video and
yeah. But according to the current narrative, they were looking for the Bigfoot tracks, and they, by complete happenstance, stumbled upon this female Bigfoot. She was making her way up from the creek, and Patterson, he had his camera in the flap of his saddlebag to grab it quickly if necessary. Their horses started to get very disturbed and frightened, almost threw Patterson off the horse, but he was able to grab that camera. He hops off of his horse, and he falls down to the ground, stabilizes himself with his elbows, and begins to film, and he gets that short, however many seconds, 9-second clip or whatever it is, of the Bigfoot. According to Bob Gimlin, they attempted to track it further, but they couldn't find it, so they took casts of the footprints, and then they came out ultimately with the footage. They sold it. They sold the footage eventually. I don't know how much money they sold it for. It wasn't a whole lot of money, but there was obviously a financial incentive involved, and so that's the story. That is the current story. I'm sure I missed some details there. But what you're talking about, what you're saying is that was, in fact, that may have been actually a cover story for a completely different scenario.
Right. So what I learned through Jan was that one of the 3 guys that's in the tracking film worked for the forestry, whatever division department. And he was involved with the guys. Do you remember the Minnesota Iceman?
Yeah.
So these guys, they were bringing it over the border, I guess, in Canada, and had gotten stopped. And the guy who got them out of that situation, he's in the video. It's that guy, Jim somebody. Forget, I have it written down someplace. He's in that video. So that's kind of odd that he's connected to both of those things.
Yeah.
So the story is that they were doing the forest guys, the guys that were down there cutting the forest down, they refused to work. They're like, we're not cutting down trees anymore. These things are, they're coming after us. They're scaring us. So they had to do something. They're losing millions of dollars. So they called this team in to go in and hunt them down. So
does the story go that it was the company, this particular company that hired Patterson and his team to go in and track the Bigfoots, the Sasquatches, or is it an unknown agency that wanted them to do this, according to the story? Because it's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which these guys are hired by just some logging company or some company trying to make a road.
Well, I'm sure that those guys, knew the area. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they definitely. Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's
they were outdoorsmen for sure.
Right. So the guy whose name I have, I know one of them. Here, I'll tell you. One of them was, I think it was Dale Moffat. 1 second here.
But what I'm getting to here is,
so I don't want to misquote. I'm not sure.
It's hard for me to imagine a scenario in which this team tracks down a family of Bigfoot, Sasquatches, murders them on camera in this horrific massacre, as it was described to you by this elderly lady, and that all of this is done, and that the creatures are skinned or whatever, and that all of this is done without intervention from some government agency. So to me,
the government is the people are the ones that sent them in there.
That's what I'm getting to. So what seems more plausible to me is that if this is true, and this is a big if this is true, then it would be more likely some kind of government agency that hired them to go in.
Yeah, that's what I believe. That's what Jan was saying. That's why the forest, and that's how the forestry guy got involved.
Right, to go in there to get rid of the Sasquatch family so that they can continue the work on the road or whatever it was that they were doing.
Right, exactly.
Maybe turn over the bodies to whatever agency hired them, and then to not say anything about it. Or they probably just wanted the skins
for themselves, you know?
Yeah, it's hard for me to envision a scenario in which they walk away with the Bigfoot skin.
Who knows, man? Who knows?
So this is a completely different story. So now we have a team of people tracking these Bigfoot, employed by some unknown government entity. They've got dogs. They're actively tracking the Bigfoot. If the video does depict pools of blood, that means maybe they took a shot at one. It's bleeding out. They're tracking it. They catch up to the Bigfoot. So then Patterson filmed, or somebody, maybe not Patterson, somebody allegedly filmed not just those 9 seconds or whatever they are of Patty walking across the frame, but of this entire scenario unfolding where they open fire on the adults and the juvenile is torn to pieces by the dogs.
Yeah.
And then somehow, maybe Patterson and Gimlin, they figure they're going to make some additional money, and they publish or they sell a sanitized version of the film that just shows the female walking before the massacre.
I have a feeling if this is true, if Bigfoot is real, I have a feeling if the story's true, Patterson probably had planned on releasing the footage of Patty and the baby, but when he lost the footage to the dude, he was like, well, I'll give you the footage back, but you're not showing the baby. I'm keeping that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And on one hand, it's more plausible to me, and to some extent, than the original story, because I'm always a little baffled that they were in such close proximity to that creature and couldn't get any more footage of it, like any more footage of it walking away, walking up the mountain. Like that was all they got, which was remarkable that they got anything at all. I mean, that's true. Assuming that what they got was authentic, it makes more sense to me that there's some unknown backstory here to where they were actually tracking the creature and they were able to catch up to it because maybe they took a shot at it and it was bleeding out or something. And there's this whole backstory. I mean, there's this additional footage. He did keep rolling, but what he filmed was too controversial, too shocking. Like you said, like basically like a Bigfoot snuff film.
I was told by MK like that the Bigfoot up there, they did something to the ground, like some type of memorial up there where there's like an area up there where the grass doesn't grow or something like that to memorialize the area to where this happened. And they're still angry at the humans up there.
And what was this? The woman, I forget if you said her name.
Jan McAbee.
The elderly woman.
Yeah,
who you talked to.
She's trying to sell the original film.
What was her disposition? Was she believable? Was she coherent? What was her?
I mean, she's believable. You know, she told me that as soon as they're ready to she will show me the problem is the film's very delicate. She can't just whip out this film and show it to every guy that calls and it'll show them the film. You know
how would she show it to you anyway? Would she put it on she'd have to have one of those old, like you said.
16 millimeter.
16 millimeter projector.
She'll only show it to people that are interested in buying the film.
And so were you in this, or will, I guess you didn't get this far with her. You never expressed interest to.
I don't have a couple $1 million to buy the film.
Did she tell you? Did she come out and tell you directly that she's willing to sell the film for $2 million?
No, not $2 million. A little bit more than that.
Okay, whatever the quantity is. Did she come out and tell you that she's willing to sell the?
Yes.
And you
she has,
and you didn't express any interest.
Wait, let me just say something. She is not in possession of the film. Her attorney is, and it's the same attorney that's in possession of the Zapruder film.
And I think you did mention, maybe you did mention this, but why is she suddenly in this stage in her life wanting to now sell this film?
Well, her husband just died. She's 70 something years old. She'd like to go live her life to the fullest now.
Right.
It just makes sense.
But didn't she tell you she didn't want to see the light of day?
No. I'm talking about the baby film, not the Massacre film.
Okay. So I'm confusing those two.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. Sorry.
Okay, so she is the one who has the baby.
Yeah, the one with with the original camera from the Patterson film is for sale.
Okay.
Not the Massacre.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
So if anybody's interested in buying the Patterson film from the original camera, hit me up. I'll broker it for a percentage.
Okay, so that's a separate issue. Now, how come if she has the original film, how come she didn't mention anything about the Massacre?
She doesn't mention it, but she knows about it.
But wouldn't it be on the original?
No.
Okay.
No,
so
they filmed it. It's separate. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So I was confused about that. So I was under the impression that the footage, that the Patterson-Gimlin footage had some extended seconds to it in which the massacre unfolds. But you're saying these are two different.
Yeah. What I'm guessing is after the baby walks up, they probably ran down there and killed them. You know what I mean?
And Patterson just quit filming before that happened.
With that camera, yeah. And then
okay, so maybe Patterson got the footage.
He stopped 6 times during the filming the Patty thing. Probably just stopped and they ran down there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now I'm tracking better. So we're talking about two separate films. Let's say one maybe that Roger Patterson filmed, which is the Patterson-Gimlin film. The other film was filmed by somebody else or by Roger that depicts the alleged massacre.
Or it doesn't exist at all. I don't know.
Or of course, or it doesn't exist at all. Of course, there's no way to know. But it is interesting. It is interesting that there's the possibility of a much more elaborate backstory.
Yeah,
because again,
and that's why
the elaborate backstory makes more sense to me than Patterson and Gimlin's original story. Yeah. It makes more sense to me. Yeah. It makes sense why there's no more footage of that creature. It makes sense why they would have been out there for that long, and it fills in some gaps for me in my mind at least, but. Who knows if it's real? Well, let's talk for a minute about Bigfoot. So, aside from the Patterson-Gimlin film, have you ever come across any other footage or any other information that is as compelling or more compelling, or that maybe has you on the fence about the existence of Bigfoot?
I mean, footage for me, it's just like. Everything is so easy to fake, only photos I've seen that I think look cool and they've already pretty much been proven to be fake is like the Todd Standing photos. I think those faces look really cool, You think
the Standing photos are fake?
I mean, I don't know. That's what I've heard. You know what I mean? I've heard like they were like models or something like that.
Yeah, or him with in a suit or something.
So
with some prosthetics on his face.
The stories to me are so much better, when I hear accounts. My favorite accounts are like the 1973 accounts from Stan Gordon from Chestnut Ridge, all the humanoid encounters that happened there. And that's something else that I forgot to mention, going back to the paranormal versus ape. There's kind of people that have heard about the massacre in the Bigfoot community. So there's a division with that as well. So people that have heard about the massacre, people that think it's a flesh and blood animal tend to believe a massacre happened, but people that believe it's a spiritual paranormal animal don't believe in it, because
I can see that. Yeah.
Because if they do believe in it, if they do believe it's paranormal, how can it die?
Right. Or how can it get
how can you shoot it
in this kind of a scenario where a whole family
it disappears in a flash of light. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, this is the ongoing dispute in the Bigfoot community, and for people who are in the community or familiar with the community, look, I always thought that the UFO community was hostile. It's nothing compared to the Bigfoot community. The hostility in the Bigfoot community, I mean, there's fundamentally two camps. There's it's a relic hominid camp. It's a biological creature, and then there's it's supernatural or interdimensional, or it's like some kind of magical creature.
There's one more. There's there's two versions. There's one that is like a natural one from Earth, which are good, and then there's the alien one that's a hybrid. That's
right.
Bad. Right.
And that crosses into ufology. So you have you have the UFO community that's sort of involved in that narrative, because obviously there have been some UFO sightings, some historical UFO sightings, where Bigfoot type creatures that were described as looking like giant sloths or something like that, long hair, have emerged from UFOs or have been seen in the vicinity of UFOs. So you have sort of that ufological crossover. And there's the opinions. I mean,
dude,
like
it's
I
crazy.
said, I'm
just let me just get the start out real quick. Like, there's been many times, like, there'll be different TV shows I'm working on, and I'll pitch the idea of like, hey, let's do something where we talk about the UFO Bigfoot connection. They'll be like, what do you mean? No, that's stupid. That doesn't exist. And they'll never want to talk about it, you know? And it's like, come on, man. Like, people talk about it. It's a big thing, you know? They won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, most of them.
Yeah, and I think people are assuming that what's depicted in these various stories, old stories from like that emerged, I think, in the early 90s, there's an assumption that these are actual Sasquatch that are being described, and so there's this. I think a lot of people in the UFO community presume that Sasquatch and UFOs are somehow related, and I'm certainly open to that idea. I don't know if it's true or not.
And you don't mean that Bigfoot's driving a UFO.
No, like they're being utilized by some
like
alien
species
or whatever, like scouts or something. That's right. Or they've been genetic, or they took like you were saying, they took a relic hominid species that may be descended from the Gigantopithecus or something like that.
Yeah, Melba Ketchum told me that from her DNA results, it was the mother was human and the father was unknown. Yeah.
So maybe there's a scenario in which, I don't know, let's say gray aliens captured these creatures and genetically modified them to make them useful, to employ them in some capacity, and that those are sort of like the more advanced genetically modified creatures, and the other ones are just the relic hominid. They're more like apes, right? Mm-hmm. So you have these two variations that may be out there. One might be the wild Bigfoot, and the other one might be the genetically modified Bigfoot. It still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why the modified Bigfoot would have all these
special powers,
supernatural powers.
Right.
And I would not include
actually, I mean, here's my crazy mind thinks, like, maybe technology could be a reason if it's a modified one.
That's what I was going to say. Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's what I was going to say. Maybe they're in possession
of some
technology,
and it would make sense
deploying.
that the human type ones would probably tend to stay in family groups, and that would make sense. That's why those.
And this, of course, I'm sure sounds completely wacky to a lot of people listening to this conversation, but this is the world in which both you and I live.
I know, I do this for a living, man.
Yeah, well, so do I. So, but I was commenting on you and I are mostly, I would say, in the UFO space, and we dabble in the Bigfoot space, right? Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah.
So, and I've always been interested in Bigfoot for a very long time. But I've never really focused any energy. I am now because things are kind of falling into my lap. But I'm doing it out of necessity because there's some situations that I feel like need to be researched that I'm being made aware of. But I'm
just a nerd.
I'm kind of new to the Bigfoot community. Like I said, there's a lot of hostility with people. So you got people who are absolutely 100% certain that Bigfoot is a Nephilim.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That this genetic testing that's been done
that
is conclusive.
explains the giants and everything.
Right. And they bring in the Nephilim, and so they bring in that Nephilim factor, and that gets thrown into the mix. And then you have, as we said, you have the group that think it's just a relic hominid.
Give me one second. I'm going to show you something.
And I'll just continue to explain this to the audience here. So you have a group that believes there's just a relic hominid, that it's a creature that perhaps evolved through Darwinian means from a Gigantopithecus into this Sasquatch creature, and it came over through the Bering Strait. There's a whole scientific explanation of this creature, and then you have the other camp who thinks that this is just some interdimensional supernatural being. Right. Oh, there you go. You got the hat. I got the cup. You got the hat. We should be selling this cup and that hat.
I got this from. You ever hear of the actor Robert Mitchum?
I don't think I know
from
Robert
the 50s, 60s. Robert Mitchum, tough guy.
It doesn't ring a bell.
Oh, old school. Yeah, when I was on tour with Corey, his bass player is Robert Mitchum's grandson.
You're talking about Corey Feldman.
Yeah. His bass player bought this for me.
Okay, does Corey believe in Bigfoot? I'm sure inquiring minds want to know.
Actually, we've never really talked about Bigfoot, but he's a UFO dude for sure.
Yeah. Well, I people laugh at a lot of people. Even I think people in the UFO community maybe snicker at the topic of Bigfoot still. But I would encourage people to. I am definitely more in the relic hominid camp. I think there's a lot of wacky, crazy stuff about Bigfoot out there, and people come up to me all the time. Like when I'm at a conference, people will come up to me, and I've had people come up to me and say, "I live with Bigfoot, and I've got a family of Bigfoot that they come on my property, they come up to my window,
story.
They come into my house. I'm friendly with them, and I've had multiple people come up to me and tell me these kind of stories. And I'm not saying I believe these stories, but nevertheless, somebody does. But I'm much more in Jeff Meldrum's camp. This is a fantastic read, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. For anybody who thinks that the subject of Bigfoot is just nuts, that it's just pseudoscience, mythology, you should read this book, because I think that there is an abundance of physical evidence that maybe it's not conclusive, but it's definitely suggestive that this creature exists. And when I say physical evidence, we're talking about, of course, footprints, and not just a couple of footprints, a whole lot of footprints that have very interesting features to them, which I'm not going to attempt to describe that in any depth. I would just
the
refer you
only
to
thing that gets me is like there's no body.
Well, yeah, but there's, like I said, there are very, very good logical explanations for all of these questions
the most common
that are
one
presented
is,
like by people like Meldrum.
How often do you come across a bear skeleton? How often do you come across
I
any
live in the mountains, and
skeleton?
I've never
Yeah,
encountered
I know.
a skeleton. I've
There
come
are
across
multiple reports of people killing them. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
the guy on Art Bell, Bugs, said he killed it and he gave Art Bell a map where the bodies were buried and all
Yes,
sorts of
and
stories.
informed, credible witnesses who have seen the creature. I'm talking about people who work in the Forestry Service. I'm talking about law enforcement people. I'm talking about people from the scientific community.
If they do exist, that there are two different kinds. I think that if they do exist, there probably are relic hominids and some other weird ones.
I think that may be true, and I have a complex view of Bigfoot. First of all, I do subscribe, in as much as I believe in the Bigfoot, I do subscribe to the relic hominid theory. I think it is absolutely a biological creature, and but I think that it's a creature with extraordinary capabilities. And this is where guys like Jeff Meldrum, and Meldrum's a professor at, I believe, Idaho State University, and they wouldn't go this far, but I do. I think that Bigfoot, because of the testimonies that I've personally heard, I think that this is a telepathic creature.
For sure. I mean, I hear like people talk about they get mind speak. I mean, there's cases where people like see Bigfoot and then they go home and have poltergeist activity happen, stuff like that.
But
it's like, what's that
But
about?
I think that, and I've talked about this in other interviews. I think that this creature has the ability to perceptually hijack human perception for a period of time so that people think that it's doing things that it's not actually doing. Rather, what it's doing is it's manipulating your perception. And this is and I've said this before, and so this will be familiar to my audience, but you and I have some crossover on certain topics. For example, Skinwalker Ranch. We both have interfaced with people at Skinwalker Ranch. And I was talking to Eric Bard in one conversation where I was asking Eric about the phenomena on Skinwalker Ranch and what he makes of it. Like what has he seen and from his scientific perspective. And Eric Bard is a true scientist. The guy's a genius. And I have a lot of respect for him. He's not conducting a TV investigation over there, him and why do I always forget his name, the owner of the ranch?
Brandon.
What's his name? Brandon. I always forget Brandon Fugel's name. Anyway, he and Brandon Fugel, behind the scenes, are conducting a serious scientific investigation on that ranch. So you have the TV show, which is, I think it's a good show. But then you have the actual...
When the cameras are off, it's still happening.
When the cameras are off, the cameras are never off on that property. They are still conducting a scientific investigation, whether all of it gets publicized or not.
I should say, when the production crew goes home, it's still happening.
Right. Yeah, and so people need to understand. Yeah, there's a TV aspect, but that's certainly not Brandon's and Eric's primary focus. Their primary focus is the actual ongoing investigation. I know that because I've talked to Eric about it, and Eric, when I asked him, what are your thoughts on all of the crazy phenomena that's happening? Like, what does it mean? Why is it so variegated? Why is it so bizarre? It's not one thing. It's like 24 different things. And first of all, Eric said two things to me. The first thing he said was he doesn't necessarily believe all of the stories that have come from individuals who've been involved with the ranch previous to their investigation. He thinks, and he told me he believes that some of those stories have been embellished, that they've been embellished, and that to some extent there's some tall tales at this point that have come out of the ranch, and hearsay and secondhand and things like this. He said so that's something that he keeps in mind, and that I think he told me he's been able to verify that some of those stories are not exactly the way that they're told. And then the second thing is And this really, really interested me because I just expressed this is my view, and this was my view before talking to Eric. He said he believes that whatever is active on that ranch, whatever it is, it has the power to, or the ability to manipulate human perception. And when he said that, I obviously took great interest in that comment, because that had been my theory, not just about Bigfoot, but about a lot of things. And he elaborated. I asked him to elaborate, and so he thinks that you can be encountering a phenomenon on the ranch, and for you the encounters is 100% real, but the entire thing is happening only from your subjective perspective. In other words, something is engaging with your perceptual faculties, and what you're experiencing is in reality virtual reality.
Right.
And he said, now he doesn't think that explains everything on the ranch. That there's obviously very physical things that happen. They see craft. I mean, they filmed it on the show.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the same thing. Like, I had a UFO sighting with my mom, okay? And I filmed it. And then it disappeared. And then it came back, but only my mom could see it. I couldn't. That's very common. There'll be a UFO sighting, and there'll be 10 people standing there, and only 2 people will see it. You know what I mean? It's all about perception.
Right. But, you know, especially when it comes to like poltergeist stuff and specific to Skinwalker Ranch, Eric's theory, working theory, is something on the ranch is manipulating human perception. That's part of the explanation. I absolutely agree with him. I think that is a component, and I think it is a component with Bigfoot. But with Bigfoot, I think it's organic.
That has a lot to do with abductions as well.
I think that Carla Turner talked about what's hard, but a lot of ufologists completely. Let's just put it this way. A lot of modern ufologists are not well versed in the abduction material.
That's because I don't think they're happening anymore.
Well, I don't know if they're happening or not. I suspect they are. In fact, I would say that they are.
Not the way that they used to.
Maybe not the way that they used to. But Carla Turner talked about VRSs, virtual reality scenarios, in which people's perception when they're in the presence of gray aliens can be and is often completely hijacked. In other words, I mean, we know what this is like now. Back when Carla Turner was talking about it, people kind of didn't understand what that would look like. Today, we can. All you got to do is put on an Oculus, one of these virtual reality headsets, and imagine it being so lifelike that you couldn't really distinguish between the VR and real life. And this is coming, by the way. This technology is actually going to be coming in the future, and it'll get smaller and smaller. Right now, it's these big headsets, and they're cumbersome, and so it's not difficult to distinguish. To get lost in a virtual world.
It'll be a holodeck soon.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure. So there's 2 things here at play when you talk about virtual reality scenarios and the hijacking of human perception. You have technology. So when you talk about gray aliens, although gray aliens are a telepathic species, you have technology in play that can be used to facilitate the hijacking of human perception. But then you have what I think would be an organic capability that I would ascribe to Bigfoot, or at least to the modified version of Bigfoot. Maybe the modified version of Bigfoot is crossed with some of the gray zone DNA. Maybe they retain some of the gray's telepathic capabilities. And if so, it makes perfect sense to me why, for example, you can have somebody, and I've heard this testimony, you can have somebody who encounters a Bigfoot face to face, 15 yards apart or closer, and the Bigfoot looks into their eyes and communicates.
Go away.
Communicates telepathically with them, and then turns around and disappears. Right? So, from the person's perspective,
he doesn't really disappear. He thinks he disappears.
Exactly. They see the creature disappearing, and they assume, therefore, that something supernatural has occurred, something interdimensional has occurred. When in reality, what the creature did was they cloaked themselves by hijacking your perspective, which they were already engaging with you telepathically. So they're already plugged in, so to speak, and they simply cloaked themselves from your view momentarily so that they could walk away without you realizing.
I got one problem with that. Thermal.
What's that?
Thermal cameras.
Okay.
There's some thermal camera footage of alleged Sasquatch on thermal where all of a sudden it just blinks out. If it's real.
Well, again, if it's real, we're operating
just
here in a space.
Just throwing that out there, man.
Admittedly, we're operating in a space. When it comes to Bigfoot, we don't.
I know. I'm just busting your chops.
It's very, very difficult to work with anything that you can consider to be data with Bigfoot. Now, these guys, these scientists that are examining the casts of the footprints and stuff, yes, they are within a realm of physical science here. There's no question about it, right? And I would say that
especially when you get to those dermal ridges, man, that's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, there's really, really, really good science behind a lot of the good Bigfoot investigations that are done by competent researchers such as Jeff Meldrum. But also, I would say, on the abduction side, I would say you have the exact same level of good scientific evidence that, and I would say even more so on the abduction side, that I think proves the existence of gray aliens and the physical reality of alien abduction and of the creatures themselves and all of that. So that's a body of evidence, but I would say there's more of that kind of evidence for gray aliens than there is for Bigfoot. Although you have a lot more people who claim to have seen Bigfoot, but we don't really know at the abduction side because most people don't come forth and talk about their abduction experiences. Whereas in the Bigfoot space, a lot of people I think do come forward and or at least to their neighbors and friends talk about seeing Bigfoot. So we're kind of in a realm of more speculation in the Bigfoot topic than I think we are when we're talking about gray aliens and alien abduction. I don't know what you think about it.
I was casting for a show looking for recent abductees, and I couldn't find anybody that had been abducted past like 90 something that would admit it. You know. I mean, that had the typical gray experience. You know what I'm talking about?
I have some friends that are abductees and their experiences are ongoing. And they don't publicize their experiences, but they are definitely ongoing. One of my friends, his wife, and this I don't know how recently this was, but she not that long ago. They're younger people. I mean, he's a little bit younger than me, so they're not like people who would have been experiencing this kind of stuff back in the 80s or early 90s. She, not that long ago, she was actually describing the experience to me when she actually was, she was not entirely subdued by the Greys. She was not entirely incapacitated before they showed up, which is a mistake on their part. And she actually was able to reach out and grab him by the neck and momentarily squeeze its neck before she went out.
Must not have been virtual.
No. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the abductions.
No, I know. I know.
Right, and the Bigfoot are biological creatures, and she was able to strangle this thing momentarily until she went out.
I've heard that a few times.
And of course, her description of the way that the skin felt is exactly the same as most abductees that I've heard describe these things. They're cold, they're clammy, they're rubbery like a snake.
Man, if I would have instantly got up, put a plastic bag over my hand, taped it up, been like, test it. Right.
Well, I mean, that's probably not the first thing that these people are thinking after they wake up from an experience like that. But the point is that her abductions seem to be ongoing, and also a couple of other friends of mine. Do they what?
Set up cameras or anything?
I don't think they've attempted to set up cameras, but it appears to me that she's an abductee. But they're both my friends. But her husband, he appears not to be an abductee. They just knock him out when they take her.
Yeah.
And they both know that an abduction is coming because they see the orbs. So when they see the orbs, they know.
Did they see them inside the house or outside?
Both.
Yeah.
Both. And they say that when the orbs show up, they know what's about to happen.
Give him some cameras, man.
And he's also seen some other weird poltergeist, as abductees do, often see weird poltergeist activity associated with the abductions.
Ask them if they want to have a slumber party.
Well, I'm guessing probably not, but I'm not sure my friend's into slumber
I'll
parties.
bring the popcorn.
If you knew which friend I was talking about, I think you'd understand why. But so anyway, I'm in contact with at least a few people who privately confide in me and about their ongoing abduction experiences. So you may be right that the abductions have slowed down.
Definitely.
But you may be wrong because
I had mentioned on Twitter about this, and somebody wrote me that I know, and they're like, yeah, it's funny you should mention that. I was speaking to somebody that works in intelligence, and they happened to mention this to me. So who knows?
Mention what? Mention what? That the abductions have
somebody
stopped?
that I know was talking to somebody that works in intelligence, and that person in intelligence mentioned to my friend that abductions had really slowed down a lot.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because Jacobs believes that they've accelerated because basically, it's a maybe not accelerated isn't the right word.
The hybrid program.
Yes, but the abductions are, as you know,
I haven't heard anything from Jacobs in years.
Well, there's a reason why.
He's getting up there.
Yeah, but he says that, and so did Bud Hopkins and a lot of the other abduction researchers.
There aren't even any, except for Kathleen Martin.
Not anymore. No, not anymore. Yeah. No. But that the abductions obviously are hereditary, and that the candidates for abduction, the abductees, are actually exponentially growing. And that there's a lot more abductees today than there was in the early 90s and in the 80s. So I don't know. I mean, all I can tell you about that. All I can tell you is that
if it's true, it's because they found a way to make it so nobody knows.
Well, they've always had that way. It's very rare.
If it was always that way, we would never know about it.
It's very rare that you have abductees with conscious recall. Very rare. Most abductees have no idea.
Something happened in the 90s.
Well, most abductees have no idea. So the ones that have come forward are not representative of the whole group. They're the rarities. They're the exception to the rule. They remember fragments of an abduction episode, and most people
what I'm
can
saying
only...
is, up until the 90s, you didn't even, except for Betty and Barney Hill, you didn't hear anything really about abductions. And
because there were no abduction researchers yet.
But you didn't even hear anything about Gray's abducted people. Well, that's
because who were they going to tell?
Anybody.
I mean, they would just look like, back then.
And all of a sudden, in the 90s, it exploded. And then
that's because you had competent abduction researchers in the field who were going out and interviewing abductees and gathering the information. Yes, you did. You had John Mack, you had Bud Hopkins, you had Carla Turner, you had David Jacobs, and others. Barbara Bartholick. You had others who were actively discussing the phenomenon in the UFO conferences, and then what happened? You had people coming forth.
Yeah, because people remembered.
Well, because they had these experiences and they didn't know that other people were having these experiences. I mean, I don't think that.
Also, though, we got to remember a lot of people were hypnotized, and that's kind of a shady subject. So.
Nah, David Jacobs never hypnotized anybody.
No. What I'm talking about is that's people that are hypnotized sometimes can be falsely believed that they were abducted.
Are you referring to the hypnotic regression?
Correct.
Well, hypnotic regression isn't like, swinging a pocket watch in front of somebody and making them cluck like a chicken. Hypnotic regression is the person is completely conscious and aware of their surroundings. They're just in a
So you
enhanced.
think hypnotic regression works on abductees all the time?
I don't know. David Jacobs didn't do hypnotic regression.
I'm not talking about David Jacobs. I'm talking about just in general.
I think that there are methods that can be deployed by an experienced interviewer, abduction researcher, of whom there are very few today, who know how to circumvent screen memories. And this happens over multiple interviews with an abductee, and eventually through these relaxation procedures and interviewing these individuals and working with them, they can get to the real memories and circumvent the screen memories. And when they do, they always get the same stories. And the screen memories are wild dreamscape scenes, mostly. And when you can circumvent those, you start to get to the raw data, the actual real memories that have been sequestered behind these artificial memories. And that's well known among abduction researchers. But I didn't mean to dive to
I just want to go on record. I just want to go on
phenomenon.
record and say that in the 80s and 90s, I don't believe that all hypnotic regression was correct. That's all.
Well, I would enthusiastically affirm that declaration.
Okay,
I think that, yeah,
anyway,
I would agree with that.
So Bigfoot.
But yeah, getting back to Bigfoot. So anyway, the reason why we digressed into the abduction phenomenon is because in the same way that I think that the Greys can
Bigfoot abducts people.
Well, they can engage neurologically with people and telepathically. In fact, I just published a video. I published the Lazar tape. I don't know. Have you ever seen the Lazar tape?
Of course, man.
So a lot of people who are in the UFO space have never seen the Lazar tape because I don't know why.
It's him and his little chalkboard.
Exactly, and I think it's
like $30 through John Lear.
It wasn't. I don't think it was with John Lear. It was with his associate.
It was one of his buddies, like Goodall or somebody.
Gene Huff. Yeah, and in the Lazar tape, he talks about how in the so-called UFO Bible that when he was read into the program, they gave him a bunch of folders to brief him and to catch him up to speed. And one of the things that he read in there was that the Greys have the ability to neurologically, and I'm not using exact terminology he did, but basically to neurologically incapacitate humans. Mm-hmm. And in other words, some sort of telepathy, right? And so again, returning to the Bigfoot, if there is a variety of Bigfoot out there, going back to what we were speculating, and this is just speculation. Right. I don't know that I believe this, and you don't know that we're just kicking ideas around here. We're just a couple of crazy guys kicking around ridiculous ideas here. So if they were spliced with, let's say the Greys spliced them with themselves to some extent, just like they do with the human alien hybrids.
If they even exist.
Maybe they transferred to this variant of Bigfoot some of the capabilities that they themselves have, namely to engage in the hijacking of human perception and perhaps even some of the screen memory capabilities. That would explain a lot. That really would. Now, I have a friend. Do you remember Mancow, the shock jock from Chicago?
Yes.
Well, Mancow's a good friend of mine, and he has one of the best Bigfoot stories I've ever heard. And I'm not going to try and recount the whole thing here, but he had a vivid up close encounter with the Bigfoot. I think he was 8 years old or 10 years old, and it was in Missouri. But they called it the Momo or whatever. I can't remember what they called it.
Yeah, it's Momo.
And he
Missouri
was in the woods,
monster.
and I don't remember all the circumstances. So if Mancow's listening to this, you have to forgive me for not getting all these details correct. But basically, he was in the woods. I don't remember what he was doing. He was by himself. And this Bigfoot, literally this Bigfoot creature, walks right by him, like right up to him. And he has this extended encounter with Bigfoot. And it was visceral. He could smell it. He could see, and it was just like a big animal to him. It was not like, there was nothing advanced about it. It wasn't like super intelligent. He was like, it was more intelligent than like maybe like a bear or something, but it wasn't like,
it was more animal than human.
Yeah, it wasn't like some interdimensional supernatural thing. It was very, very bestial, animalistic. It had a very pungent odor. It had, like he describes it, this is pretty some funny details, but he describes it in great detail. He had an extended encounter with it. It was right there, and like he could have touched it, and it walked away from him, and he watched it walk away, and I can't remember all the details. So anyway, people who say that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being or some supernatural creature have to account for those kind of sightings that people have that are, your run-of-the-mill biological animal, albeit maybe smarter than a gorilla, but not as intelligent as a human being, and that's in play here. So anyway, we can wind up this conversation with maybe a few more comments on the whole massacre thing, because I think we've drifted far from that. But
if we don't stop, we'll just keep going all night. Anyway,
exactly.
Like we always do.
But to put a cap on this thing, so obviously you're going to continue to try and
until I
see if you can see this footage, right?
Exactly. Until I see this footage, I'm going to keep going, and hopefully I can maybe get some of this on a TV series or something, or a documentary. Speaking of which, everybody check out my new show, Alien Encounters: Fact or Fiction. You can watch it on Max. It's on Max right now, and Discovery Plus and Discovery Channel.
Do you got a YouTube channel?
Yeah, it's David H. Altman.
And what's your social media accounts?
Right there, it's at David H. Altman.
Okay.
It's on my. I think that's my YouTube channel. That's
X, right? You're on at.
Yeah. Everything is David H. Altman.
Okay. Well, everybody, obviously, go follow David. He's always got something fascinating going on. David calls me all the time. He's always got some crazy thing in the works. But what about just so that we're clear, you're still pursuing the situation with Jan to try and see if you can at least see the footage of the alleged footage of the juvenile,
and I'm still
Bigfoot.
trying to locate this missing woman who's got the massacre footage.
Right.
As soon as we're done, I'm going to try and call her phone again.
Try and get a hold of this massacre footage.
Yeah, I called her 3 times a day to see if her phone works.
Well, obviously, even if you don't want to, if you can't say anything publicly, I expect a phone call if you ever get a chance to see any of this. And then, maybe, I don't know, maybe in the future you and I can work together on some kind of a Bigfoot project. But I've got a couple things I told you off the record, a couple of things.
Well, we still got that other thing going that I'm developing too. So
yeah, that's right. So Dave and I have been working on some things behind the scenes. We've been talking for a while now, and anyway, hopefully you get to view one of these videos and maybe make a TV show out of it.
Yeah, even if I could walk into a network and at least say I've seen it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I can't walk in there and say, "Oh, I heard about it." You know what I mean? Right. I gotta be like, at least if I can't show it to them, I've seen it. That's all. At least I can do.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we've exhausted.
Yeah.
Everything we can say about this topic.
People have heard us argue enough for the night.
Yeah. So thanks, Dave, for
thanks for having me,
jumping
Tim.
on here with me, and I encourage everybody to go check out his YouTube channel and follow him on social media.
Have a good night.